What's up, everyone? It's Adar coming at you with another episode of Startup Engineering Daily. Let's hop right into it. So our first story is from Weezer OS Int. I think we've covered a story from him before, but he has some pretty interesting vulnerabilities to release here. And I think we covered a story from him before about another vulnerability that he exposed. He's been going crazy on like finding all of these security issues at these massive companies, so definitely a really good follow. But he's announcing in response to his first tweet. So he has this first tweet here that says ClickUp.com, which is kind of like a Jira competitor, a project management platform. I used them before previously in the past. It was pretty solid, but it was like any of those other project management platforms. But they have a hard-coded API key in their JavaScript, as he says here, which gives him 1,000 emails and 3,000 internal feature flags. So it has emails for like Home Depot employees and also like security company employees that use ClickUp internally, and just really wild. And then he has a follow-up, which is for Fireflies.AI, which is a meeting recording platform. And basically he exposed that they have an unauthenticated request that lets you download full call audio and video, including emails to every participant, and an AI summary of private meetings. I don't know if you need to be part of the meeting to be able to grab it, or if it's just able to be grabbed by anyone. But he says the example here is a Disney meeting call summary where they're deciding to improve or fire the janitors who leave dirty toilets. And you can kind of read through it here in the tweet that they're talking about like accountability and stuff and just corporate nonsense, per usual, but related to the janitors, and it's from Disney internal. So really crazy. I saw another tweet where someone was talking about how these big companies, basically they ran a security company that essentially failed because these companies don't care about security at all. And we've talked about it in the past, or I've talked about it, how it just like blows my mind that these companies have so much money. They raise, billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, and they still just don't invest anything in security. For the Fireflies one, he did like a disclosure to the company and waited X amount of time. I don't know how long exactly, but he waited and he disclosed to the company like the security researchers are usually white hats just who really love the game and want to keep software safe. So they really try to work with these companies. They don't expect anything in return because you can't hold them hostage. You kind of just have to take the bounty that's given. And, we talked previously how like one of the security researchers, Eva, from a couple years ago, who managed to get to Cursor through Firebase and one of their platforms, she was able to get like 50 to 100K after getting like a 20K reward for being able to RCE through Cursor. So you can find these really crazy vulnerabilities here, like being able to see internal meetings at companies and you still will get nothing, and they just have to go to the public to do it. So just so crazy how much these companies don't care about security, and I don't understand it. If I was a founder of one of these companies, I feel like security would be a really big driver. Obviously, the issue is that it doesn't generate revenue, it just prevents loss. But in this case, and maybe people don't even care that you can access these meetings, but surely Disney's going to have to move off and move to another company like Granola or whatever. But just blows my mind how much these companies don't care about security at all, and the industry in general just takes so much advantage of these security researchers who basically have to work for free or just pennies that you'll give to them if you discover something really important. Okay, next we kind of have a layered tweet from the CEO of Replit, Amjad, and also from Mitchell Hashimoto, who's the creator of Ghostty and also the founder of HashiCorp. So Ghostty is leaving GitHub, and they released this blog today saying basically that GitHub's outages have been unreal. Mitchell talks about this really interesting story about like how even from college, and I think now he's in his 40s, like he's been, or I guess he's in his late 30s, he's been, using GitHub every single day. He's been obsessed with it. That's kind of like been his doom scrolling, was going through issues and going through PRs because he's just been working in open source for so long. Like HashiCorp was all of these open source projects, and now Ghostty is like this open source terminal that's really solid, very memory efficient. Even though I did see a tweet today that was talking about a memory leak from Ghostty, but personally I've never experienced that. But basically he has this notebook where he would put an X for every day that GitHub would have an outage recently because their reliability has just been so bad. And he says basically it's been happening every single day for the past week or so, or the past few weeks. And they wrote this blog about Ghostty, the project is leaving GitHub. They're going to leave a read-only version on GitHub, but they're trying to move somewhere else to manage the PRs and the issues. And even like today that I'm recording this, they hadn't planned it in the blog, but there was a massive outage where basically you couldn't read any pull requests on GitHub for about 2 hours. And if you go to their status page, you can see that incident that they reported. And that alone is crazy, but I just wanted to cover this tweet as well from Amjad, who's the CEO of Replit, and he's saying it's honestly impressive that GitHub kept the service up at all, given this kind of growth. And you can see here they're up to 90 million. And this chart doesn't really have a breakdown on timeline exactly, but you can just see it's been like a crazy hockey stick, and GitHub was obviously like the #1 leader in Git-based software management, but they're up to 90 million pull requests merged. Maybe that's like year to date, 1.4 billion commits and 20 million new repos per month. And he's saying that free services will become untenable with the advent of human level bots. Worth exploring micropayments even cents per Git push might be enough to reduce spam and make this sustainable. This is idiotic, maybe powered by Bitcoin. Like nobody's going to do this. I mean, maybe it'll happen eventually in the future, but not anytime soon. Like it would have to be like a Stripe backed stablecoin situation, which Stripe is working on, but this is just stupid, like paying per push. But I actually do think the breakdown that people have right now, which makes a lot of sense, is one, usage based. So maybe if you're doing a lot of commits and a lot of actions, and you do pay for GitHub actions on usage based, so it's per like gigabyte hours, or you're essentially paying for the compute that you use, and there are competitors that offer a lot cheaper, like Blacksmith, and there's another one that Theo promotes. So they have kind of moved towards that, but the idea that free services will become untenable, I just don't believe this. I still think there are a lot of loss leaders. You look at all the AI companies, they're subsidizing to the max. They're giving you $200 plans that give you $5,000 worth of tokens. And also GitHub, I think, has a really solid model as well, where like anything that's free has to be public, and now they're training on your data as well. So you're basically giving them free money essentially from code level data that they can train on. And if you want to pay for private repos, which used to be free on GitHub as well, but they got rid of like 5-10 years ago, that is what you have to pay for. So I think that's a pretty good system. I think Replit does have a free tier as well. So I don't know how contradictory it is, but I do think you have to pay for like the major hosting on Replit. So it does make sense. And obviously AI companies like Replit are driving a lot of revenue, even though they are subsidizing in tokens. And I don't necessarily think Replit is subsidizing tokens as much as like the models themselves, like Anthropic and OpenAI and the labs, the foundation labs. And obviously the industry is going to have to move, like at the very least, like it seems like seat-based is going away, because for SaaS products, like you're going to have agents for doing most things. And I don't know if you can charge $20 per month per agent, but at the very least you can still charge seat-based per human. But I think that would be the first to go away, and it would be replaced by usage, but not like these cents per Git push microtransactions. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Okay, next we have a tweet from this guy David, who's a machine learning professor at University of Toronto, and they're announcing Taki, a new open weight historical LLM. They trained and fine-tuned a 13 billion parameter model on newly curated data set of only pre-1930 data. And it's cool. There's been a lot of examples that came out. There was like an example, obviously, that it asked like if black people were going to take over white people in professorship, and it referenced Harvard, and it was like, that's very unlikely. They might be able to become professors in their own colleges, but probably not in the white colleges like Harvard. They said like at Harvard there's probably 30 total professors or something. And then they did ask it as well, like some interesting things, like they were using it to see if it can learn Python, even though computer science hadn't been invented at the time. I do think information theory though existed in 1930, so maybe there's a piece of that, but it is a very interesting idea, and it kind of speaks to like, these fine-tuned models that focus on very specific things. And it's kind of cool as well, because you can explore it from a historical research perspective, but you can also explore it from like the perspective they're trying to take, which is like, what is the kind of core knowledge of learning software engineering that you could teach to other people, because that isn't like clouded in the bias of these normal LLMs that have so much experience with coding and are leveraged on the training data from coders. So pretty cool. And I just thought it would be like kind of an interesting, like it's kind of a neat little research project that they've been doing, and maybe there will be a paper that comes out, but yeah, check it out if you're interested. Okay, and then kind of similar to the last story, I just like this tweet from Mitchell Hashimoto, who is the founder of HashiCorp, where he says he's someone that still likes tab complete models. I personally don't like the tab complete models. I like when AI writes all of the code for me and then I can review it offhand. But I do understand why people would want to move slower and be able to review line by line. And it was an interesting time, in 2023 when we did have the Copilot tab complete, that was still writing a lot of our code. But I do remember we got to a point where people were just spamming tab, and I think Cursor even released like a tab only keyboard, which is kind of funny. It's kind of like the Stack Overflow copy paste keyboard, which existed even before AI. So on that point, just real quick as well, it's not like we've fully like outsourced our brain. Like people were outsourcing their brain to external tools like Stack Overflow even before AI became popular. So it really is on the developer themselves to make sure they can withstand the mental model and make sure that they understand the code they're writing, and being able to learn new practices and all these pieces and understanding the tools they're working with. But Mitchell says that it struck him today that local models are probably good enough nowadays for doing tab completion, and surely folks are doing this, but he can't find any great resources. And Primogen also says he built his own autocomplete a while back, and it was quite fun. He used a tiny box, which is cool. That's from George Hotz's company, who's the founder of Comma AI, and he was the first person to jailbreak the iPhone. But what this made me think about too, which is kind of similar to the story we talked about previously, is like, what if you had a model that was only fine-tuned on the docs of the language you're using, or specifically like the tools you're using, like the databases, etc. I do wonder if you would get better results than these models that are trained on the entire internet, because there's so much stupidity and like horrible code that's probably been trained into these models. And I know they try to fine-tune and improve it, and obviously the harnesses themselves try to add layers on top, and then you're also supposed to add your rules within your projects to make sure it writes clean code. But I think it would be interesting if you really had a fine-tuned local model that was only trained on the documentation of the languages you're using and the databases you're using, and then added the rules that you care about, like writing clean code, small functions, good naming, etc. If you would have better results. So I thought that was pretty fascinating, and I don't really have the time to research into this, and maybe there is a tool that exists like that, but I do think that's probably where we're headed in the future, is more of these fine-tuned models that are obviously cheaper to run as well, because they have less data and less parameters that they need to worry about, but they're more like specialized on the tools that you're using, and especially for writing code, which is what I primarily use AI for. This kind of stuff interests you and you want to talk with some like-minded people, join the Audinato Discord in the description. Thanks.